Before we start anything else, let me take a moment and thank some agencies who sponsored and support this event, including People Incorporated, Community Services for Everyone, Deaf Access Services, and my friends at the Independent Consumer Advocacy Network.
Erie County Executive Mark Poloncarz has a proclamation to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Hi, it's Erie County Executive Mark Poloncarz, and I'm here with the Director of our Office for People with Disabilities, Frank Camerata, to honor the 30th anniversary of the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act. In 1990, during the George Herbert Walker Bush administration, one of the most important pieces of legislation ever passed in our lifetimes was the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's improved so many people's lives. We have a special proclamation honoring that 30th anniversary. We normally would be doing it in person, but because of COVID-19, we're wearing our masks and we're doing it online. And here's more from Frank to tell you why this piece of legislation mattered then and still today.
Thank you, County Executive. So this legislation was so important back then that we didn't have curb cuts. We didn't have signs at intersections to let people who are blind, visually impaired cross safely. We didn't have opportunities for employment for people with disabilities. All of that has certainly increased over the last 30 years. And we're going to be doing so much better in the next few years. I know that. So thank you so much for sharing this with me, and let's celebrate.
So congratulations to all who made the Americans with Disabilities Act a reality 30 years ago. We continue to fight for all those who may not have the same issues as we all do, to fight to ensure that we're protecting all Americans, whether it's the Americans with Disabilities Act or other laws. And in the end, when we go out in public during these crazy times, make sure you're wearing masks to protect yourself and protect others. Take care, everybody, and happy anniversary, Americans with Disabilities Act.
Over the years, you've been involved with getting a lot of other groups involved in supporting disabled but able to vote, the ADA and other issues. How did you go about getting their involvement and being part of the overall push?
Well, we just kept at it. And we've just kept going back. In total, we visited each state at least 5 times. And that's a minimum. That means 7, 8, 20 times for most states. And we just went back, kept hammering away at it like a Coca-Cola ad.
That you were involved with, that you believe made the biggest change, what would that be?
Oh, probably the ADA.
Why do you think it is that you became one of the spiritual leaders of the disability rights movement?
Well, I'm not sure that I did to the extent that you imply, but I am a spiritual person, and I often say that I'll be with you in passion and spirit, and I love you. And all that is true. I love the people. I'm with them in love and justice. I think love and the sharing of the passion for justice and liberty and justice for all is some of the most powerful motivation in our culture.
Voting is a basic right of Americans, a right that was denied to a significant number of Americans with disabilities for centuries. People with disabilities accessing the polling place was one problem. People dealing with the voting process was another. In this program, we'll look at the struggle that it took to allow a basic right to be exercised, the right to vote, and in particular, the hard-fought battle in one of the founding states, New York.
The 2000 presidential election and the debacle in Florida brought the need for election reform to a head. Congress responds to this need by passing the Help America Vote Act, or HAVA, in 2002. The new law provides states with billions of dollars to modernize their voting technology. It allows people with disabilities the right to vote privately and independently for the first time. And it mandates that at least one voting machine per polling place must be accessible to voters with disabilities.
This panel is to talk about the importance of independent living in our community. I want to make sure that I get everybody. I already introduced Stephanie Orlando. Immediately below her on my screen is Maura Kelly. She's the Director of Mental Health Peer Connection. Below her is Ray Frank from Independent Living in the Genesee region, whose title is bigger than she is. I think that's from the fabulous room, isn't it? Below her is Sarah Alonso. Sarah is the Director of Independent Living of Niagara County. And last but certainly not least, Bianca Logan, who is the head of our youth peer program at West New York Independent Living.
A slideshow of previous disability prides over the years.
You need to look for anger. You need to have somebody that really is angry about some of the situations that people with disabilities, you know, again, and I think part of the trainings is to try to focus that anger. You know, anger just itself is not very, very productive, but focused anger can, I think, really start moving a person to doing that. And I think that's the passion is kind of lost in a lot of the sort of advocacy things that we see in our community. I mean, we've gotten too intellectual. And so, you know, when we do and look for people who are gonna, get involved and stay involved, you have to have that sort of like low burn going, all the time. And without that, without the passion, it's just, usually they're not successful.
So how'd you transfer that into the disability movement?
Well, it seemed to me to be the same thing. It was about having a government that was open and responsive and fair and that obeyed its own laws. And oppression is oppression, whether it's based on where you live in a different country, or the color of your skin, and things like mistreatment and poverty and poor health are pretty universal issues that people worldwide need to fight against. And those are certainly issues in the disability community that have been targets of advocacy forever.
The New York State Disability Rights Hall of Fame recognizes individuals who have made lifelong achievements which positively impact people with disabilities in society. Here are highlights from the induction ceremonies from 2018, the inaugural class, and 2019.
Reform Hall of Fame, which is, it's really hard for me to put into words. I'm feeling very emotional, which is not, it's not like my usual thing.
This is the inaugural Disability Rights Hall of Fame induction. We're just so excited that we can finally recognize some of the really key and important players who have been so powerful and impactful.
To understand the movers and shakers in our own history is critical to protecting our movement. And,
Four leaders in the disability rights movement, Douglas J. Uziak, Denise Figueroa, James Wiseman, and Judith Heumann, speak on what the ADA has meant to them and for people with disabilities across the country.
The impact of the Americans with Disabilities Act, I believe, nationally, is that it's put the country on notice that people with disabilities are to be taken seriously.
Doug Uziak is the CEO of Western New York Independent Living. He says the Americans with Disabilities Act has impacted all areas of life, from transportation, employment, communication, government, and voting.
Symphony conductor James DuPriest, who contracted polio as a young man, profiles three people with disabilities whose lives have been shaped by the struggle for equal rights in the short movie, My Country. In the movie, he draws parallels between racial barriers and the barriers faced by people with disabilities.
In black and white film footage, thousands of people stand below the Lincoln Memorial. A dark-haired woman faces microphones.
New to Disability Pride musical performances this year is Casey Shannon. Here she is with Shorty Don't Wait, and Here Comes the Sun.
This is Shorty Don't Wait by A Great Big World. Shorty don't wait in line. Shorty don't wait till sun don't shine. Shorty don't wait in line. Shorty don't wait till your life goes by.
As I've been thinking with the voting accessibility, there's been a lot of the deaf community where they're unsure who they should vote for or information being put out. What I mean by that, if you watch a lot of the presidential debate, any candidate debate, even the president their speech, none of them actually have an interpreter presented. There's no picture-in-picture.
How you think the disability community's been handling the pandemic? Frank, you can go first.
Sure. Thanks, Todd. I think, the four folks who are on this call with us or in this interview piece, they have been involved with the county's actions from the very outset. I think the county's reaction or the county's actions, I feel have been terrific. I guess I shouldn't speak for myself, but I can, I am the voice. We have a voice in county government that enables people, the community, people with disabilities, to have a voice in what's going on.
Thank you all for joining us this year for our virtual Disability Pride. We hope to be back next year, live and in person, for our parade and festival.